84 slides of all kinds of different drills and some good videos to show you with all kinds of ranging athletic abilities and all kinds of great results using these drills. So here's what we're going to look at. I know the big thing now is the NFL experiment. I'm going to save that for last. We're going to look at arms and feet, we're going to look at shin angles, and we're going to look at drills from Ken Clark's paper, which to me was really a big deal. And people call me mad scientist. I'm more of an improv person, which is a yes and. We're going to look at something, and instead of saying, no, this can't happen, we're going to find out what it is and take the best of it and make it something better and keep rolling the ball down the court. And that's what improv is. Someone has an idea and someone tops it or changes it into something else. And of course, I'm from Chicago, so of course we're going to celebrate Second City, which is a Chicago improv group, and these are some of the great people who graduated from that. So, I always have to start with this intro. So here's our first topic, foot departure, or foot in, foot out conundrum. People always send me films and emails, and the foot's turning in, the foot's turning out. What's right? What's wrong? And I look at that and I say, yeah, that's a thing. Let's look at that. But really, the first thing I want to look at is it's the sum of everything. So you have a target, and that's the most important thing we have is to have a target. And your body's going to find the best way to get to that target. So even though your foot may not be working great or something else may not be working great, the rest of your body is going to find a pattern. I won't call it a compensation pattern, but it's just a pattern to get you to your target in the best way possible, safest as well. So if your foot isn't working perfectly, your arms are going to counterbalance where the foot is actually pushing to, and that's how you're going to get there. And so where I think there's a great example is in this Netflix documentary called Rising Phoenix. Phenomenal documentary. It's the history of the Paralympics. And I think they take 7 or 8 different athletes about what has happened to them and how they compete and what the route is. And while they're doing that, they interplay the actual history of the games. That the history actually comes from an escaped Jew from the concentration camps in World War II. He's a doctor, and he goes to London, and they give him a job of working at a hospital with a bunch of wounded veterans who really went there to die. And he creates sport to give them a reason to live. And that's really where the Paralympic Games come from. But anyway, this gentleman that we see here running, he was a survivor of the Rwandan massacres, the genocide. When he was 3, some people came, killed his mother with machetes, and then they chopped off his legs with machetes at age 3. And he was adopted by a French family after all this, and I'm going to go ahead and jump to this. I apologize for jumping back and forth, but I can control the video much better if I come out of it for some of these things. So here he is coming on the side with his cheetah legs. Very nice looking gait with the cheetah legs. The cheetah legs are going to perform all the rocker motions when you come through. He kind of swings a little bit so he doesn't scuff that cheetah leg on the bottom, which is kind of cool to think that his body has made that adjustment knowing that those legs can catch. Looks great from the side. But it's when we look at that from other angles, just like when you analyze all film. This is him when he got his cheetah legs and he's jumping around and he learned how to move. But it's really when we see it from other angles. So here he is. You can see he's got a side step so he doesn't catch that foot on the ground because he doesn't have a knee or an ankle to bring that up and carry it through, so he has found another way. But you can see that he kind of pushes to the side. There's the advertisement for the cheetah legs. And when we see this film from the top, we'll see how his arms compensate when he is trying to get through. So you can see the collapse on one side to compensate for that swing coming through, but the arm on the right side throws out wide. So again, so the sum of all of the tension coming through, or the force coming through, is knocking him forward, which is really pretty amazing to think about it, because the body's adapted to these cheetah legs. It doesn't have any feeling down there with feet or ankles or calves or anything like that, but yet he finds a way to move. And again, every time he hits, he's got to compensate to make all that force go forward, so his body's going to go into different positions. Again, there's the swing, and then he's got to counterbalance to bring it forward. Even the head collapses a little bit to help bring that over, more centrally located or central, so at the end of the day, when he pushes, everything is going forward. What does that look like in sport? Well, I had an athlete come, actually two. Chris Mang was an athlete that came to me occasionally from the North Shore. He was a sprinter. He actually ended up running at Notre Dame. And he's got a girlfriend who ran at Notre Dame, and she wants to make the Olympics. So we did an assessment, and here's what we saw. Here she is coming at us. I'm going to get her close. And we can see, let me go one step right here. We're looking at her right leg, and this is what we're looking for a hole, because she's a really good runner. I mean, she's right on the edge of being an Olympic sprinter. But what we see there is that flick of the ankle, and you can see that it's kind of pushing over the top and to the right. And her body compensates by leaning a little bit into it and throwing that arm forward. So the sum of all the movement is going to knock her forward. And so I thought, well, let's look at some different exercises that we can do to help compensate for that. So what we came up with was, well, we're going to do some diagonal runs and some diagonal different kind of runs. So we're going to have to force that right leg to come inside more. If it flips off the side like it did in that pre-film, it's not going to look so great. And I thought I was pretty happy with that answer. It was something new for me. But then Chris Mang, being much smarter than I am, and he thought, well, you know what? I'm going to put resistance on that foot and make her go and make her drive through that. So this is her first rep where she's got to drive through that ankle. And if it flips off funny, she's going to fall. And what's cool is this is her first rep, so she's got to learn to do this. And we'll see when she goes, it's a train wreck, because she's trying to come off that outside of that foot, but she knows if she can, it's going to collapse her whole body. And look at how quickly she's going to start learning to drive through the inside of that foot. Now again, the pressure from the exergenia is becoming more and more forward, so she doesn't have to use it as much. But Jordan will eventually learn how to deal with this. In fact, this is later where she learns how to deal with this force. She learns how to torque through the thigh and drive through that big toe now. Even when it's at her side, it's much more athletic looking at this point, and she's learning to drive through this foot. So Chris plays with this for a while, and then said, you know, hey, we've done this for a while. Can we come back and do another assessment? And I said, sure, come on back. I'm always looking for visitors. And so here's what we ended with. We're going to see a completely different foot function when we get her up to speed here. She's pushing more forward. There's more of a snap coming forward with this right foot. Left foot's gold. But it's coming through. There's not that push to the right, you know, a 20-degree push to the right. She's driving through forward. And that was a pretty major change. And so how much of a change of that? Well, Chris, who goes out in times with Tony, she dropped from a 109 to a 105 in about a 3-week period of time. That's a pretty substantial time just by changing that foot in a fly 10. Now, if she's a 400-meter runner, imagine that multiplied times 40. That's going to be a pretty substantial result. And as an effect of that, she is running some of her best times in her 200s, 400s, and even 600s, just by changing that foot. And to show you that it can go any way for any age, this is a really interesting guy. His name is William. He's an 8th grader. He's a fan of mine. I didn't know I had fans. But his dad brings him every once in a while, and we look at his running form because he is obsessed with training. He does everything I ask, which is a lot of fun. And we can see he does the same thing that Jordan does, where that right foot, oops, went too far, is kind of flicking off to the side, right there. So I gave him the same thing I gave that Chris made up with some resistance to the side. And again, his dad has a free lap and a pretty substantial time drop. We can see he's completely changed, and now his feet drive through to the big toe on both feet because he did both ways. And that's an 8th grader. And that's after a 4-week period of time. We got really good foot function just by changing that. So how do we do that? Well, here's a series of drills. Like I said, the name of this presentation is New Drills. Here you go. Diagonal runs with resistance. You can change the angle to begin with. You're going to be pretty steep, and as you get better, you drag or you move the resistance to more behind the athlete. This is Joe. He runs at DePaul. Similar issue, and that's what we worked on this summer. Where when you come through with that, you've really got to, now you've got to torque that shin and that thigh into that leg, so you're going to get a lot more punch out of that leg. Or we can do a diagonal single leg hop. I'm going to come back to this gentleman here in a second. But this is even more difficult because you can't rely on that second leg to help balance you out. You can only do that one direction. Here's, this is Abdul. He would have been, 6'10" high jumper, 6'8", 47 triple. We're pretty sure he would have been state champion in the triple. So he can jump. But that right leg is not is the weaker of the two legs because he can't find that big toe. So with Abdul this summer, we did diagonal bounds with resistance. And again, I can change that angle and change where that foot has to push to and really challenge that foot. So I'm going to jump out here again so you can see this individual here so I can slow it down a little bit better. So this is, I wouldn't call it common, but not uncommon. This is the Division III football player. And we can see how his arms cross. He's a defensive back, excuse me. And we can see he hits and those feet just flop, land hard on the outside of the foot, and he pushes off the outside of his foot. And we can see his arms counterbalance that push where a lot of torso to go forward, a lot of arm coming forward. Again, pushing off the outside of his foot. There's a bad one right there. Let me get him one step closer, and you can really see how bad this left foot is. Now, a legit time for him would probably be 4:8:40. Of course, his coaches get him. Everyone's 4:4 these days. But we had to fix that. And so how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to give him some different drills to do. So the first one here is a tandem run. This is, I've daisy chained some rubber bands together, and we're going to challenge that inside leg. So the two of them will run down together. As they're running, they're going to try and pull the rubber band apart as they go. And it's going to challenge that inside foot.
Pull, 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 pull.
If he comes off the inside of his or the outside of his foot and doesn't press through, he's going to get pulled in. So again, we've got a target, and this is a great drill because it forces positive running. Franz Bosch's positive running, where if my hips are behind or my hips are off or my timing is off, I'm going to get pulled in. So again, you have this physical, tangible tool or target that you have to fight when you run. Here's another one. And you can see how hard he has to fight on that left leg to come through. And he trains with Glenn Messner, and Glenn's got timing systems and all that. And he had a pretty substantial drop after we got that foot, his feet squared away. You can do a simple diagonal sprint. I kind of like these. In fact, I'm going to start doing these if we have a track season. This will be a variation in our Fly 10 days where we're going to see how fast we can go from lane 1 to lane 3 in that 10-meter thing, in that 10-meter distance. And again, he's got to drive through to that big toe. I took his arms away so he couldn't counterbalance or cheat with his arms and make up for that foot. The foot had to do its job of getting through and pushing through to the inside hand step.